Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Unofficial Unreal Engine podcast, where we talk about all things Unreal and also boiled gooses. Gooses. I said goose.
Geese?
Geese would be, of course, the correct
or
thing. Yeah. It's I wanted to say goose, and then somehow it went longer, and then it should have just been geese at that point. We're your hosts. My name's Alex, and welcome back to co-host
Jacob. It's
Yeah.
great to be back. I was out last week recovering the work monsoon following GDC, but I'm excited to talk about GDC and presumably much more, given our track record of going on very long rants about oddly specific Unreal features. I think this is going to be a golden episode if you're here for that kind of thing.
I am, at least.
Cool. All right. Well, I mean, I feel like we just jump right into it. GDC happened a few weeks ago. It was a pretty exciting time. I was there and got to see a few things. I don't know. What do you want me to jump in on, Alex?
Sure. So, yeah, we touched briefly with Vikas about some of the things that I saw remotely. MetaHuman Animator, procedural content generation 5.2. Just saw the live streams of that. You, my friend, were actually there, like in the hall, watching the State of Unreal. So I'd love to hear some of your reactions to everything you saw, and also just, you know, some of the boots on the ground stuff. How were other people reacting?
Yeah.
Did you see any exciting Unreal Engine celebrities, things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, yeah. So the context for the State of Unreal event was, you know, I was out there with a team of folks from the company I work for, and I told them all, okay, this is the big event, right? We got to be up early, you got to be ready to get in line, because my assumption was it's a small-ish theater, it's gonna fill up quick. We got to make sure we're in there, right? I'm not missing this. And you know, obviously, you go on to some of these conferences, you end up drinking a little more than you think the night before, and so I woke up, you know, maybe I want to say around 7:30, you know, and you know what, I splashed some water in my face, got out of bed, and rolled up. I said I'll sober up in line, and made it to the theater about an hour before start seating. There was already a bit of a line. By the time they opened the door, it was way down the block, and I think only you know, maybe a tenth of the people who had lined up made it in the theater. So I felt very lucky that I made it in. It was really an effort, but once we're in there, you know, it was pretty exciting to see everyone kind of just getting ready for the State of Unreal. There were a really interesting mix. I mean, I obviously, and I'm wearing my Unreal Fest shirt. At Unreal Fest, it was kind of funny because it was majority non-games, it felt like, most of the time. Even though I don't think that's technically true. I think they actually had a little diagram that was like 52% games. But when certainly I felt like I was having conversations at Unreal Fest, it was most people were not in the games industry, which was fascinating, right? Yeah. This obviously being GDC, the Game Developer Conference, it was definitely primarily games folks, who I think are typically or sometimes excited about different things than, you know, the folks who go to like SIGGRAPH or to even Unreal Fest, right? And it was kind of interesting to see. I think we were sitting next to some folks from like Niantic, and there was kind of like the different games houses scattered throughout the theater, and I assume everyone kind of had a different something they were looking for out of that. But you know, there were a few things I walked into that kind of expecting. I was like, okay, we're gonna get Unreal Fortnite, right? Because that was teased prior to the event. We got the Unreal Engine for Fortnite kind of teaser. I expected that we would get 5.2 because there was tons of 5.2 content on the GDC schedule, and it's like there's no way they're just going to have all these 5.2 sessions with where no one can actually get hands-on with it after the fact. So I figured we're going to get 5.2, we're going to get Unreal Editor for Fortnite. Past that, you know, it was anyone's guess. But man, they blew it out of the water, and it was exciting to see, as I'm sure you guys touched on, you know, in the last episode. It's, you know, the funny thing was, I had like the heckler section right behind me. So if you like listen to the stream, there's like one or two people who routinely like make all the annoying noises from the crowd, and they were like right behind me. So if you want to like position me in 3D space in this theater, I was like right there. But those were clearly the Unreal Engine nerds, and everyone else was just like taking notes, I guess. Yeah, it was an exciting, a really exciting event. I think, the main takeaways for me from that were, I mean, MetaHuman continues to kind of drive things forward at an incredible pace, and the accessibility being the focus there. I mean, the accessibility is just incredible of MetaHuman. I got to go to a few of the talks around the deformation system that they added, and I have all sorts of interesting. I don't know about interesting. I have all sorts of thoughts and opinions on that kind of stuff. But it is really cool what they're doing MetaHuman. I mean, if you saw the broadcast, you saw the live demo they gave, it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of people don't believe that was live, by the way. They think the whole thing was like secretly pre-recorded. From your vantage point, did it seem like there
oh
weren't
yeah, it was 100% real. I mean,
right.
the thing was, so what they did when I went to that second talk about MetaHuman, they showed a second clip of doing these sorts of recordings, right? And they're like, yeah, I mean, we just have this one tripod that we've been shipping around for your iPhone. And it's like, they're like, no, this is the iPhone tripod that we've been recording everything on. We just brought it out here for GDC. But yeah, no, I 100% believe it was real. I mean, I think it'd be very difficult in the least to like record the actress on stage with the same exact intonation as with the final, like that would be even more difficult than doing it live, right? Like trying to like have her somehow perfectly replicate the performance, in sync, I think would be even more complicated. I think it was a risky demo, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah.
Very risky demo, but I'm sure they had backups, and they did have to do that a couple of times during the conference. They had a few machines lined up, and they would just switch between them when Unreal crashed and stuff like that.
Wow.
But yeah, no, I thought that demo was pretty incredible. I think there's a few kind of criticisms that potentially come from folks who are looking at Unreal and some of these features they're rolling out. And I saw some of this on Twitter too. I don't know if you saw any of this, Alex, but there was a bunch of people who were like, Unreal is a ton of experimental features that no one can really use. And while it's cool, like trying to ship a game with Unreal, the experience is going downhill because of all the experimental shit that they're introducing. And I think, there is room for that criticism in the sense that, a lot of these features definitely are experimental. And they're labeled explicitly as experimental, but from an engineering standpoint, it's certainly difficult to avoid creep into non-experimental features when you're implementing these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think for folks like you and I who really love playing in the bleeding edge of everything and seeing what's possible, we really appreciate the fact that Unreal Engine shares things before they're ready for prime time, so to speak. And yeah, they have experimental or beta labels. I'd say the most valid critique I have seen is Lumen and Nanite not quite being ready for production, but Unreal Engine 5 being so dependent on them that it's not like you can just take what you're doing in 4.27 and upgrade it to 5 and everything's going to be better. There are still a lot of cases where at the moment it still might make more sense to stay in 4.27. But I love just having this big sandbox of all these features that eventually will all be production ready. But yeah, I wouldn't have them do it any other way.
Yeah, I am totally with you, of course. I mean, I think that one thing that people aren't considering though is the features that they label as production are typically labeled in production because they are in Fortnite, right? Like,
that's right.
Right. So they are being tested across every platform and across lots of users, right? The production features. Unreal, I mean, Fortnite is on 5.1 as far as I'm aware, right?
Yeah.
So if anything, you should feel comfortable using, 5.1, because if you're going to tell me that your game is going to use more Unreal Engine features than Fortnite, that's a bit, that's a bit sketchy in my opinion. though, I mean, to be perfectly fair, I am not a game developer, right? I've not shipped a production game in Unreal Engine, so take it all with a grain of salt to say that the developer experience is a complicated thing, and I'm not assuming I understand all of it.
Yeah. Speaking of Fortnite, how are you feeling about the announcement of the Unreal Engine Fortnite editor?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty incredible tool. I think in my feeling is that there's two ways to kind of look at this. One is that this is a competitor for something like Roblox, right? And I have no investment in Roblox. I really don't know much about it, so I can't really comment a whole lot on the value there, just because I'm not a Roblox player. I've never interacted with it. What I will say, though, is on the opposite side, it's an incredible tool for what I would think of as like, Unreal Engine Lite, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. So the Unreal Engine code base has been growing exponentially. I mean, it's millions and millions of lines of code, right? Yeah. And don't get me wrong, all the major subsystems are of course used in Fortnite, like we just said, right? But in terms of the editor experience, with everything that's getting packed into it right now, it's, I think, becoming for an entry-level user or someone who just wants to make fun stuff,
yeah,
becoming more complicated to keep up with the pace of innovation that they're pushing, right? Like AAA studio in Unreal has so many features that they have access to, and they potentially have time and effort to put into really developing those into a game. Whereas the average user does not necessarily have that much time if they're just trying to make an indie game, or they just want to create an interesting experience to share with their friends, right? So I think the Unreal Editor for Fortnite is an incredible way to bootstrap just fun stuff. Yeah. I think, for example, just taking animation, procedural animation out of it, right? Just being able to drop an environment in, and all of a sudden you can have your characters running around and executing all sorts of interesting logic. I think is pretty incredible. That's a lot of boilerplate kind of stuff that they just kind of clear off, right? And I think I'm very excited to see that.
Have you played with it at all yet? I don't imagine you've had time.
I played with it very briefly on the show floor, because they had a bunch of demo windows and stuff like that. I am intrigued by Verse.
Yeah.
I think so. We covered Verse, I think, quite a few episodes back at this point when they announced it. And it's a pretty nerdy thing that they introduced to Fortnite, in the sense that they introduced like a functional programming language. And for those who aren't necessarily familiar with functional versus non-functional programming, non-functional programming is like your Python scripting and JavaScript. And I mean, JavaScript is actually pretty functional, but think about like Python, okay, where it's very straightforward in the sense that all of your logic flows kind of almost as you would say it, right? Like, so for every object in this bucket, I'm going to do X, Y, Z on that object, right? Like that's kind of how you would phrase it if you were just a human talking about like executing something, right? Yeah. Functional programming is a little bit different, where it's like, Y is for every X inbox, do blah. It's like, it doesn't come across as a very human way of thinking about code, but what it does do is provide very strong or potentially very fast execution. It's somewhat closer to how logic and state machines really operate below this, like below or behind the scenes, so to speak. And a lot of people really like functional programming because it's extremely concise compared to non-functional programming. So Verse is a very nerdy functional programming language, and it's intriguing because there's a few really cool features. Like, for example, as far as I understand, there is a try-failure system kind of built into Verse where when you when you want to execute some game logic, you can try it without the risk of crashing the program. So you just try, and if the whatever you tried succeeded, you get some return, and if it fails, it can execute some other logic. So you can create these very interesting trees of logic where you can try and fail at different game mechanics or different objectives over and over again without running into issues with the compiler or the runtime, which I think is pretty fascinating. So like if you're doing the same kind of logic in C++, you're straight out of luck, right? Like if a function you execute fails for any reason, right, like that is a crash,
right,
more or less, right? Obviously that's a simplification, and I'm not a very hardcore C++ developer, so don't come at me, those folks who are.
Come at him.
But there's some really interesting stuff. I am intrigued as to how they want to sell this to the Fortnite crowd, right? Like Verse is definitely not what I would describe as your first programming language kind of thing.
Yeah.
At least from the outside, right? And obviously I think it conflicts with blueprints to an extent, which is interesting, right? My understanding is that going from Verse to the underlying C++ in the engine is very straightforward. But I think the reason that they couldn't integrate Verse into Unreal, the editor, the full Unreal editor, is because Verse doesn't really work well with blueprints, not really with C++. So now they have this weird triad they're trying to deal with, right? And then they also added Python to the engine, right, for scripting, not really for runtime scripting, right, but for editor scripting and stuff like that. So now there's this whole ecosystem of different languages you can use to interact with the engine, and Verse really only uses Fortnite objects and objectives as far as I know. So like it's definitely gotten a little more complicated when it comes to like what you do and what. And I'm really intrigued as to where they go with that, but it's exciting to see. It's definitely exciting to see. I'm really curious to see what people come up with Fortnite, Unreal Engine for Fortnite. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah. The thing that I am surprised by how excited I am is the source control system, which just kind of works out of the box. It's so straightforward. And I very quickly made a team with like a few different accounts, and like we had multiple people inside the same map at the same time, and like so much better than Perforce.
I think I've been hearing whispers of this for a while, and I'm sure you probably did too. But it's very funny that it rolls out with Fortnite. I mean, it makes sense to some extent because you're as far as I understand, there's an import process for assets from the editor, Unreal Engine editor, into Unreal Engine for Fortnite, or
it's a little messy. It seems like it would be really simple because you literally just migrate from Unreal exactly the same way you would migrate to any other Unreal Engine project. But then, Unreal grabs all the things that it thinks it's going to bring to another Unreal Engine project. And then a bunch of those things like blueprints, like certain materials and material functions, they get over to the Fortnite editor, and like those are all broken. So it's a little messy, but the core geometry is there. It's kind of cool. I took some like architectural levels of other projects, and it's like, aha, now it's in a Fortnite map.
Yeah, interesting. I'm curious if they specifically designed the source control system to stay away from like blueprint dependencies and stuff like that. I mean, why can't we have this for the editor, right?
I know. I mean, they have to give it to us eventually. Like it's so much better than working with GitHub or Perforce or any other system I've dealt with. We're doing stuff with Plastic right now that like it would just seem so cruel to not also bring this to Unreal. The other thing I want to mention briefly about the editor is it was very interesting a few weeks ago. I think I mentioned briefly having my kids in Unreal Engine and trying to get them up and running with like a little game they wanted to design. And so they were doing the landscape tool and they were creating these ramps. And I was showing them how they could import the different game templates to have like a car or a person who's running or flying or VR. And that was cool, but it's still like I'm showing them the entire Unreal Engine editor. And I've been doing this for a few years, but of course, it's still very intimidating. So to go from that to opening up the Unreal Engine Fortnite editor with them, a lot fewer buttons, and then all those Fortnite assets just available where it's like, let's drop a car spawner and a helicopter spawner and a dirt bike spawner, and let's use this volcano island. And like, it was so quick to not only just start to set up something that was based entirely on their suggestions, but then to say like, okay, test. And then we go to the other room and we open up our PS5 and like suddenly, you know, they're using their PlayStation controllers to play our game that we just made 5 seconds ago in Fortnite.
Yeah, I mean, it in terms of like I said, just making fun stuff and providing that accessibility, I think it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You know, I am very intrigued to see where they go with it. I think it was the next logical move for the kind of creative stuff that they were doing in Fortnite. I don't know. I think the jury is still out on how this fits into the ecosystem, you know, the existing ecosystem of Unreal Engine developers. Like how many of them would choose to use this system over the existing one, you know, using Unreal Editor for Fortnite over Unreal Editor.
Yeah,
I think that is a bit different, you know. So that said, like, we'll just have to see. We'll see what people come up with. Maybe it's so cool that, like, you know, indie devs don't feel like they need to go out and you know, ship their own game, right? Like maybe we'll have to see, right?
Well, and there's some interesting potential for like sandboxing or workshopping a game inside Fortnite with this built-in user base, and then eventually, you know, saying like, oh, actually now I want to add more custom features. Now let's bring it to Unreal. Did you ever play the Forgotten City?
No.
So it's an Unreal Engine game, but it started as a Skyrim mod, which is kind of cool. So the
Okay,
entire like playtesting and development was done just as part of Skyrim, and then it got so popular that they finally like split off and brought the whole thing to Unreal Engine and made it. But I love the idea that this could be a good onboarding system where someone could have like a seed of an idea, get something running in the Fortnite editor, suddenly a bunch of people start to play it and offer feedback, and then they have like a really good game plan literally to go build it out into something more mature.
That's pretty cool. I honestly hadn't thought about it from that angle. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, there are, what was it that was I mean, Battlefront, right, was a mod for it was like Daisy. No, it was like the zombie, you know, like Arma, right? Arma 3, right? I think was Battlefront was a mod for Arma 3, if I remember clearly. Someone's gonna call me out on that if I'm wrong. But yeah, I mean, and then Battlefront spawns Fortnite competitor, you know, like I don't know. I think that is an interesting story to tell. I think the Unreal Editor for Fortnite is really cool, and I think people should be excited about it.
Yeah.
I think that the last thing that really struck me from that keynote was PCG, or the procedural content generation tools in 5.2. You know, this is something they had been teasing small bits of for a while now, right? Like we had at Unreal Fest, there were a few talks on, you know, procedurally generating you know, geometry scripting has been around a while.
Yeah, we've also had like the procedural foliage box where you can just drag a box around and it'll put like trees in there.
Yeah, so I think it's really cool to see them lean in on this. Obviously the demo they gave was awesome.
Yeah.
But that was a very, you know, contrived demo, so to speak. But I think that's an extremely cool tool. I personally, like, if I had a bunch of time to spend messing around in Unreal, that's probably what I would be spending a lot of time messing around with. Yeah. Because if you can build compelling content procedurally, like, you have the ability to create just much larger scale than you could otherwise, right? And that's always been my feelings with like Houdini and Houdini Engine and you know, being able to do that kind of stuff, I think is really cool.
Ever since we got the atmosphere sky system that started to actually,
Yeah.
create like a proper world, I started to imagine what like a No Man's Sky built in Unreal Engine would look like. And then like World Partition came out. It's like, okay, this is better for the open world system. But the question was always like, okay, but how would you actually make enough content? And this starts to head in that direction where you could start to imagine literally No Man's Sky levels of worlds where all that content is
Yeah.
procedurally generated. And you can pretty much count on anywhere you go, it's going to look good and work well.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually not even possible before Unreal Engine 5, right?
Yeah.
To do that because the world scale got capped.
Mhm.
Just due to the coordinate precision that was capable, that was possible in Unreal Engine 4. So like the maximum world coordinates was like in the few millions of meters,
Mm.
which is not enough, as
Yeah.
it turns out, for interplanetary games.
Surprise.
And don't get me wrong, maybe you should reconsider if you're just going to do like physically accurate, universes. Like you're probably going to still end up with some like overflow error, but it is possible now. And I haven't seen anyone really give that a shot, but you have to imagine with some of the procedural content stuff, like I'd also imagine it's still going to require some tools that don't exist yet, right? Like procedurally generating like spherical objects with terrain. Like a lot of that tooling is probably still closer to the Houdini side right now than Unreal Engine side, but everything that's going on with the modeling tool set, geometry scripting, and PCG means I totally see that there's a possibility for those kinds of games to start popping up, and I'm all for it. I think that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it just reminds me of so much of the exciting things going on right now with AI and ChatGPT and Midjourney and all that, where we're starting to get to that point where you can be a little bit more of a curator instead of a raw creator. So you can kind of start to give like the guidelines, the prompts, the parameters, and then say like this is the rules of the world that I want to create, and then there it is, and it now is doing so much more than you would ever have the time to do or the resources to do on your own.
Yeah, for sure. And this is kind of leaning into something I was going to mention earlier around the metahuman deformation stuff.
Yeah.
So like right now inside of the editor, I mean, Unreal Engine editor used to always just like all the interfaces were very much involved in just asset like curation management. Like you'd open up your actor, you'd be setting actor. Yeah, everything was very like how do I put this? Like all the different UI components were really just designed to interact with the level editor.
Yeah.
Or objects within it. But for example, with this metahuman deformation system, you can now do actual like AI. You can train a very small, albeit like neural net on this deformation system inside of the editor. There's like a training. It's kind of wild. You press a button and literally the little Unreal Engine dialogue says, "Oh, training, blah 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 blah." And it's like that's not something that we would have seen a few years ago. Like we would not have seen Unreal dip their toes into that sort of functionality within the editor, right? It would have been an import your model like that. I could have seen, but no, they're doing actual training. And the stuff with MetaHuman, like when you're trying to derive like someone's facial structure from a few images, or you're trying to, match, like that's also doing behind the scenes, probably some inference on a model somewhere. Like I don't know how that works, right? Like I haven't been hands-on with it, but so I think we're starting to see way more like computationally intensive tasks in the editor that have nothing to do with rendering.
Yeah.
And given all the stuff they're doing with, like we said, modeling and generating content, you can certainly see the room there for, some AI generated tools to get involved. I think there's a lot of resistance to it right now, and I get that. But I will be intrigued to see how they start to introduce those features, because I'm assuming they will.
Yeah, and ever since, MetaHuman Creator started, which is all these AWS instances spun up on the cloud, like it certainly seemed like, oh, well, if Epic already has, this giant army of cloud computing, why wouldn't they also start to use that for other, machine learning or whatever kinds of
Yeah.
reasons as well? So it seems like that's starting to finally happen in a larger capacity. And by the way, on the MetaHuman side, they did mention during that main demo, like the tongue gets like,
Yeah.
placed correctly, and there's like teeth checking as well. But then there was like another little demo that I actually found in another YouTube video that was showing like back
Well,
deformations and
that's
like
that's
all
what
those
I
muscles.
was. That's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
talk a little more about that side of it in particular.
Yeah, so I'll try my best to summarize the solution that they came up with. Essentially, what you can do is inside of right now, it's a workflow that bridges between Houdini, the editor, and Maya. So this is really for very like full production focused people, so to speak. Not to say you couldn't go out and do this, right? But essentially what you do is inside of Houdini, you do Vellum, so like muscle simulations, right? And you import a skeleton into Houdini. You simulate the muscles in multiple positions. So essentially, like you capture a bunch of like training data from Houdini around different muscle positions and stuff like that. And the animations, I believe the idea is like in Maya, they have a tool to procedurally generate a bunch of different target poses and stuff like that. You bring it into Houdini and you simulate the training data, and then the training data gets imported into Unreal.
Cool.
And once you have that model, you can do some final tuning inside of the editor to apply that to your to your rig or skeleton inside of Unreal. With the idea, and you get some pretty incredible results. They showed it with MetaHuman, though in theory it can apply to any sort of character. It doesn't have to be a MetaHuman or realistic human. But the end result is that you essentially have a network which is designed to designed in this problem space of like deformations at different angles of different limbs, and you get just realistic, like you can do it with clothes too, right? So like you get clothes that fold on themselves in the right way, you get muscles that contract and expand in the correct ways, and they interact with each other more naturally, and the entire solution is essentially AI based. So you essentially train a very small network to understand those deformations.
And after that's happened, can the deformations run in real time, or does it all?
Yeah, they do.
Wow.
So they do run in real time. I can't remember what the final output. I don't think it's like blend shapes or anything like that. I do believe it's still applying the effect in real time. But if I remember clearly, and I'm really stretching my memory here, so I apologize. I will make sure to link the talk if I could find it or if it's available. But if I remember clearly, the impact in real time was like I want to say up to a millisecond. So it's not insignificant, right? Like, but for your like hero characters and in certain situations, it adds really an extraordinarily convincing effect.
Yeah.
Particularly with muscle or loose clothes or stuff like that. People don't really realize that there's a reason, like for a lot of games, characters wear really tight clothing,
right?
And it's so that you don't have to simulate a bunch of like cloth flapping around everywhere, right? Like, but yeah, no, for certain use cases, it's really, really cool. And the fact that you have essentially so again, you generate the training data in Houdini, right? Like this is your computationally intensive data that takes a long time to generate. And you import that into Unreal, and then you train a smaller network, like a small neural net, to understand that deformation space, so to speak, right? And then they're literally doing inference off of it. It's like a compute shader kind of thing in real time, right? So yeah, super cool. That's the kind of thing I'm kind of thinking like this is how they're going to start introducing more AI features. I was actually at that that talk with one of my company's clients that used to be at DreamWorks, and he was telling me a little bit about some of the work they had done, and this is public information.
Yeah.
DreamWorks published a bunch of papers on this sort of thing. So like supposedly this sort of work and these sort of applications of AI in film and TV and even games has been around, but the fact that it is a like a UI editor inside of Unreal is pretty insane to me.
Yeah, and I wonder too about because Unreal Engine has become such a one-stop shop for so many things. I wonder about the different layers of I want to say precision we might get to, where there's going to be like the live version, and Live Link Face is a good example of this, because that's now going to be fractured into like the actual live version and then the version of what happens with metahumans and training and machine learning. But in addition to the live version and that processed version, I'm also always thinking about when you finally are rendering something out of like movie render queue, and could there be some additional C bars or something where in the same time, if you're doing like a path tracing pass, you're like, hey, yeah, it's okay, Unreal, you don't need to render this at 90 frames a second. You can spend 3 minutes per frame and like really get everything exactly right. I wonder if we'll also start to see a similar thing there, where you can say like, I know we've already got this training data or whatever, but like, I want you to really get into the weeds and like spend an extra couple minutes on every frame, like making sure everything is like film quality ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when you look at the path tracer and you look at some of the features they're rolling out there, and I think I don't know if I probably have already given this rant, but
you don't like the path tracer.
I don't like the path tracer in Unreal. I think it's very much a cop out for the technology that's been developing for so long.
Yeah.
And a lot of people use it as a crutch, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think in the world we live in today, right, there is a lot of value in being able to preview something quickly, even if that quality is a little bit lower.
Yeah.
With the ability to understand that in a somewhat deterministic way what a final image could look like, right? Because if you have something low quality and you can't really imagine it in full quality, then what you're going to end up doing is a lot of iteration. You're going to wait for that full quality render to finish, and then you're going to have to go back and fix it, and you're going to have to cycle through that a bunch of times, right? But if your like real-time preview is close enough that you can understand what the final output is, in a deterministic way where you don't have to do your iterations through that final output, then I think there's real value there, right? And I guess that's kind of what you're getting to, right? If you can have, I mean, even right now with Lumen or RTX GI and all these other tools, I mean, we should probably also comment on Cyberpunk's new ray tracing direct features, I think what they call it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
But those tools are getting very, very close to final path trace results in real time, to the extent that certainly for games it's plenty. When that gets good enough for virtual production or final frame, I don't know, but it is close enough that you can certainly understand what the final image will look like. And I think that is interesting. Like the final process should just be a cleanup. It's kind of what it seems like things are tending towards. And as it turns out, actually AI is pretty good at that too, right? Like it's pretty good at taking a noisy image and developing it into, a target image with no noise. So, I totally agree. There's lots of room for that thing, but I don't like the path tracer.
That's fair. Yeah, personally, I tend to I'll turn it on every so often just to be like, how close am I to like that ground truth reference? And then I'll turn it back off and go back to using Unreal in the normal way.
Right. Yeah.
Anything else at GDC that got you excited? Did you go through the exhibit hall? Anything there?
Yeah. I walked around. I ran into Tim Sweeney, which is
wow,
relevant.
amazing.
Well, so right after the State of Unreal, we had a meeting with someone from Epic, and so we rushed over to their meeting rooms, and then we were just standing there in kind of the common room after our meeting, and like the entire cast from State of Unreal, including Tim Sweeney, just walked in, and I was just standing there trying not to freak out. Right, like, I was just trying to keep my cool because we were there for business, and I wasn't just gonna like become a complete fanboy. I should have, but I wasn't gonna become a complete fanboy.
Right.
But yeah, he was just hanging around. I definitely freaked out a little bit internally. Anyways.
Nice.
Actually, later in the week when I was flying out, I met Adam Savage at the San Francisco airport too. So
Cool.
I had like a full week of seeing a bunch of people that I just like, I'm such a nerd about. Anyways, other cool stuff on the floor. Honestly, Epic really dominated a lot of the attention from GDC because there were a lot of companies where you could very clearly see the overlap between the technology Epic was bringing to the market and what they were doing, right? So like, for example, Perforce obviously was there, right? And, they have that little checkbox as like Unreal source control. And you're like, oh, well, I don't know if I really want to use Perforce if Epic's doing something, right? Like, and there were a bunch of people who were doing like AI, motion capture or face reconstruction. It's like, well, I'm going to use MetaHuman. I'm not going to use, and this is very much from my perspective. Like I said, I'm not a game developer, so there are definitely more fine-grained choices to be made in this mix. But certainly from looking at it from my perspective, it did seem like there was a lot of competition in the games industry that was being kind of sterilized by if you were part of the Unreal Engine ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that story would have been very different, a few years ago, particularly with Unity, right? Like Unity would have been the hottest company on the block for a long time. And now their booth was right next to Epic's, right? And it was like the second biggest booth, as you'd imagine, right? But there was nothing as impressive as what Epic was showing, right? There's just
well, thinking about, so I was at GDC last year speaking on the future realities track, and Epic famously did not have much of a GDC presence at all last year, and it was my very first time at GDC, and everyone who was a veteran was like bemoaning the lack of Epic and just feeling like there was a big hole where Epic should be, throwing parties, having a crazy booth, giving amazing talks, and it was funny to like just feel the aura of that, because Unity had a big presence, and I got like a cool Unity t-shirt and things like that, but everyone was commenting on the lack of Epic. And also, like, it's interesting to think about the kinds of booths that Unity is showing at things like GDC. I'm curious what you saw there this year. Last year they were showing like the Ziva Dynamics stuff, which is like a little like MetaHuman. They were showing a little of the stuff from Weta, who they acquired. But in all those cases, those to me read as like very particular tech demos, and not something that like an indie developer could pick up and just start like working with. Like those look like polished things that a giant team worked on. And I've always been impressed with Unreal Engine's ability to distill something really complicated into something that anyone could pick up and start to learn.
Yeah, 100%. I think if you're looking at, so for example, MetaHuman, it's been shipped in quite a few games already.
Yeah.
Right. Like there are a bunch. I don't know about, Unity's, competition, how Unity competes there. But what I will say is that the biggest difference for me between, you're a blinking IV cam. For those who are listening, Alex just turned into a blinking IV cam image. So
I'm back. I'm still here though.
All right. Anyways, I think the biggest difference between Epic and Unity and why they've had so much success with these experimental features is because of their licensing.
Right.
Because anyone can get into it and just start playing with these tools. Like they get free press all over the place from people who are just doing cool stuff with it, right? Or, short films, or obviously the virtual production side, Epic has a fairly large lead. But I think it does come down to licensing, because if you're in this space and you are looking to play with some of the latest and greatest tools out in the market, then you're probably looking for something that has the easiest entry point, right? And you're looking for something where there's lots of, content out there, like tutorials, stuff like that, right? And you're going to find a lot more of that on the new Unreal Engine features because there's just way better access to them.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what's exciting to see. Now, there was no Epic Games party at GDC,
Oh, really?
as far as I'm aware.
Oh,
So there's like there. Oh, you're
I know,
blanking.
it's okay. I'm aware.
So right next to the convention center, there was this Marriott, and it was an absolute madhouse. It's an enormous Marriott. All right. But at the top, there was this bar that has these like Death Star windows up top. So one night during the conference, I met up with some folks from the training team and just the random assortment of very niche Unreal Engine celebrities, I guess.
Love it.
You would call it. And go up there, and it's absolutely mobbed, right? Because there's no like official, again, there's like a lot of Unreal Engine folks there because there's no official Epic Games party. But they actually had to shut down the elevators.
Oh, no.
They had to shut down the elevators to the top because it was getting too crowded of just nerds.
Too many nerds.
It was wild. It was wild.
Yeah.
But no, there's no Epic Games party, just this like one really, really crowded Marriott.
Yeah. Funnily enough, at South by Southwest, which I was told going into South by Southwest that there was no Unreal Engine presence there. There actually was an Epic Games party at South by Southwest that I feel so bad about because it sounds like a lot of really cool people went to it. I went to another party that was at the same time, and I should have gone to the Epic Games party.
Yeah. You should have.
When in doubt, go to the Epic Games party. It's likely going to be the best thing out there.
Yeah, I mean, Fortnite money is good money, right? Like
it is good money.
That's the synopsis, right?
Yeah.
But it was a good time overall, and it was an exciting week. I'm trying to think what else was. Oh yeah, GTC happened the same week, so that's NVIDIA's. Now it's very AI focused conference.
Yeah.
But they did speak a little bit about Omniverse, which is their what should I call it? Asset management, content creation, visualization platform, whatever.
Very elegant.
It's the best I can do. But it is a really cool platform. I do recommend people at least check it out. There are like free versions of it, which I think are actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth, even for someone who's not interested in professionally using it, it's worth an hour playing around with it because it does have some really cool features on being able to, edit things with multiple users and multiple different, apps and visualize. Like there is some really cool stuff there. But this year they announced a few features for it. But overall, it's kind of just exciting to see where that's going in this space with USD. Like USD was a big topic as well as GDC.
Mm-hmm.
USD and asset management has definitely become a pretty large topic, larger than it was, I guess. And then the last thing I have here on my list is pixel streaming. We didn't mention this, but Alex, do you want to share a little bit about what you've been messing around with?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate to be someone who's been poking our mutual friends at TensorWorks for a while, saying how much I wanted to get, first of all, WebXR to work with pixel streaming. And as part of the system that has made that possible, they've also made it so that you can stream multiple cameras out of Unreal Engine via pixel streaming. Why is that exciting? First of all, unless you're in the Unreal Engine editor, there's not a great way to make a build in Unreal Engine and use multiple monitors and say, like, I want camera A, B, C, D, etc. It's actually kind of a pain, even if you want to just set it up for like a little video village sort of thing. But now with the pixel streaming setup starting in 5.2, you can just designate any camera. Technically not a camera, technically you're using the scene capture 2D component, but you can take that and add what's now called the streamer component, and then you basically just activate that. And now when you're in pixel streaming, you get this great little drop down of like, here's all the active streamers in your scene. And so you can have a video village. You can have a local multiplayer game where everyone, instead of like a split screen, everyone could be on their own computer in their own browser, seeing their own view, and it can all be running from one Unreal Engine instance. So I did put out a little tutorial on getting started with setting that up. I even did like a very short 2-minute like speed run tutorial, which I've gotten some nice feedback from. Maybe I'll start doing more of those. Like, how quickly can I explain this very new concept?
That'd be cool. It's like there was a guy who did all those Unreal Engine videos and blueprints on like XYZ in 60 seconds, I think.
Yeah.
You should try to do like, so some like pixel streaming or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some VR, AR stuff. I mean, I think this is a super cool feature. It's been down the pipe for a while. But it opens the doors, especially for, a lot of, virtual production or just like film, TV production. Like it's going to be super useful for folks who want to, distribute views of a scene, worldwide kind of thing. So I'm really excited to see where that's going.
And we're of course excited to see what we can do with it for live events. We did this production of Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard back in July of last year, and as part of that live show, we had an interactive way where people could pick the real cameras in the space and kind of pick their own view. And now through this feature, we could do the same thing, but entirely within an Unreal Engine environment, even if there's CG plates and live action and any number of different fun virtual production things going on. It just opens up a world of possibilities. So very excited to see what not only us, but other people do with it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's all sorts of really interesting possibilities, and pixel streaming is becoming more robust kind of every day, which is exciting to see for sure. Well, cool. I think we're getting near the end here. Do you have any shout outs you'd like?
I do have a shout out. Before we do shout outs though, I just have to ask. So as I hope our listeners know, Jacob knows a lot about Fortnite, big Fortnite fan, me kind of a Fortnite Luddite, but between the Unreal Engine Fortnite editor and the new season of Fortnite, I'm suddenly becoming much more interested in Fortnite. So I'm a huge fan of Attack on Titan. And so when I saw that Eren and Mikasa and Levi were going to be part of this new season, I thought like, okay, I should at least learn like what a battle pass is and like some of this stuff. So first question is, have you played it all with the new season and any of these new things that just unlocked like yesterday?
I have not yet. I have not. It sounds like I need to. I think like I've said from the start, Fortnite is the best way to see what a good Unreal Engine experience looks like. If you're like play and see what the new features are. I mean, it's really cool.
And very briefly, like walk a newbie like me through like, okay, so I've never spent any money on Fortnite before. There's these new skins, weapons, something called mythics. None of this stuff means anything to me. If I am really excited about playing with these new characters and all that, what's kind of the quick start guide for like what I would need to do?
So either you need to spend a lot of time playing the game, right? Or you can spend like $20 and just like buy the skin you want, right? The battle pass gives you access to unlock them via playing a lot, right? So you spend, and if you play enough Fortnite, you can earn enough V-Bucks by playing to get a battle pass every once in a while. So you technically don't need to pay anything. You just got to play a lot. But if you haven't played a lot and you want to get a battle pass this season, you got to spend like $5-10. And then you have earned the right to play a lot to get it, or pay another $10-15 and just buy the skin. So and look, I'll be perfectly transparent about this. I don't have enough time to play a ton of Fortnite. So when like the Doctor Strange skin drop, I just bought my way there. I'm not gonna sit here and act like I'm an incredible Fortnite player, but I wanted the Doctor Strange skin. They got me there, right? Like capitalism is a bitch sometimes. They got me right. But I honestly, I'm fine paying $20 for Fortnite over its lifetime. Like that's a pretty cheap price to pay for the amount of content that they give, right?
And I guess I still don't quite understand how the seasons work. So like you bought that Doctor Strange skin. Do you still have access to it, or is it gone now?
Oh yeah, no, you have access to it forever.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So if I'm really excited about the ODM gear Spider-Man mechanics from Attack on Titan, and I buy those tools and those weapons, like those aren't going to go away at the end of the season.
So the weapons change every season.
Okay.
But the skins you can keep, right? So like
Gotcha,
you're really excited as playing as that character in terms of like the visual appearance. That is permanent. But they change the weapons every season so that you can, obviously it has to rebalance with anything they introduce into the world. So like you might be able to play with the like specific weapons for that character for a little bit. But you know, next season you probably want, like one of our Jade, my fiance, and I are one of our favorites was the Spider-Man like costume that you could get inside of the world, where you could like swing around like Spider-Man. It was so much fun. And then a few seasons, or I think, a season later, obviously it was gone. We were a bit sad about it, but I was like, oh well, that was fun, right? New content. But they're really good about introducing new fun weapons to play with. And so it's just it's awesome. It's awesome content. I feel like anyone who is interested in Unreal Engine should play it, even casually, right?
Yeah. Oh, cool. That's great. I'm definitely going to jump in and probably pay a little bit of money. Seems like I can give back to Epic a little bit. Epic's been very good to me. I can throw a little bit of money their way.
we should play some Fortnite together.
That'd be fun. I bet you could teach me a lot just about like basic, how to build a fort or whatever.
Yeah,
That's why it's called Fortnite, right? Because you build a fort and sometimes it's nighttime.
I guess I'm terrible at building, so you won't get very good instructions from me out of that.
That's funny.
Yeah,
cool. All right.
You ready to jump into some shout outs here?
Yeah. So my favorite kind of people are the ones who dive into Unreal Engine and they decide there's one particular thing in there they want to learn a lot about. And so they go super, super deep down a rabbit hole. They figure a bunch of stuff out. And then not only do they say, hey, here's a cool thing I made, but then they emerge from the rabbit hole and they come out and they say, now let me tell you what I've learned. I've gone on the hero's journey and now I want to share it with you. And so there is someone on Twitter named Han Yang VFX, and he decided to go down a rabbit hole of how to get amazing car crashes, and I'm frozen, out of Unreal Engine. And he used like the destructible meshes that are part of the Matrix City demo, but he just figured out like what's the minimum viable product to actually like orchestrate your own car crashes. And what he did looked amazing. And then he gave a course and he has a Twitter thread that breaks it all down and like, here's what you need to know in like 8 minutes. And I love it. And it's fantastic. And we'll have a link to that in the show notes. Everyone should check that out if you have any interest in having really exciting car crashes. And I also love there's like a cinematography side to it where he's like, well, and when you're filming the car crash, you should really be driving another car and like have the camera coming out of that car, because that's what you would typically do in like a live action shoot. And it just looks phenomenal.
That's cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I have one or two shout outs. One, I want to shout out Ryan from Skyglass. We've mentioned this app a while back.
Yeah,
it does like real-time compositing on your phone inside of Unreal Engine scenes. It's quite cool.
Yeah.
Their app went live now on the App Store, so you should check it out if you want to see this kind of tech work. But we met up at GDC, and he's a cool guy, so I wanted to give him a quick shout out. I think I have another, but I'm gonna go back to you in case you have one.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Fluid Ninja, which is something I hadn't really been following that closely. I think you might have mentioned them at some point, Jacob. But some of the stuff I've been seeing, I can't even really shout out a particular creator. But just, if you look at Fluid Ninja Live, the ability to simulate water and smoke and sand in Unreal Engine is at a level that I just never would have thought possible live. Like literally just go into Twitter and type in Fluid Ninja and just start scrolling down and be amazed.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I think that's actually it for me. I have not been up on my usual antics in Twitter, but shout out to all the folks that got a chance to meet up with the GDC. It was a good time. Looking forward to seeing those folks again. Shout out to Unreal Engine, I guess.
Yeah. Are there any events or anything coming up for you, Jacob, if people wanted to try to snab you in person? Snab you? I was going to say snag and grab. Snab you.
Well, you should have said nab, because I might be at NAB next week.
There we go. The one in Vegas?
Yeah. which I don't know if how well that. Well, I'm sure Epic will be there. Actually, I know they will. But I don't know if anyone's there wants to meet up. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter. Jacob Feldman 17, I think. I can never remember this stuff. Yeah, Jacob Feldman 17 on Twitter. If you want to message me, I'm happy to meet up. I'll be at NAB, and then did you see the Unreal Fest in Australia that's happening?
Yeah, God, I'd love to go to that. I don't know if I have time, but I love Australia.
I'm
I've been since I
eyeballing
was
it
like
the
12.
same way. I don't know if I really have the time or that's a long flight. So
It's a very
I don't
long
know.
flight. Yeah. And I'd love to submit a talk and like go chat about VR and AR and all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a non-trivial amount of bandwidth to pull that off.
If you are going to Unreal Fest in Australia, let us know.
Yeah.
Curious to hear who's headed there. So
could even be a fun interview. Like I'd love to just chat with someone who goes to Unreal Fest in Australia and kind of gets a tour of the whole experience.
Yeah. Well, I know the folks from TensorWorks will be there. So
perfect. Yeah.
We've been talking about having them on the podcast. So maybe that's the time.
That'd be great. Yeah. And they're awesome and based in Australia. One thing I want to shout out briefly. So I will be speaking at the Real-Time Economics Summit in New York City. It's a very exclusive invite-only event, but if you are one of the invite-only people who are coming to it, please do come say hi. It's going to be a discussion about I'm looking at the topic, open metaverse, Web3 from promise to reality. I'll be giving a talk about the utility of XR in really high-end business models based on a couple projects I've been involved with. And if anyone wants to check that out, it's realtime.community/economics-summit. I've been involved with the Real-Time Conference for a few years. I started off curating their architecture track, then did some stuff for their storytelling track. And Jean-Michel, who runs the whole thing, is amazing and always puts together an incredible list of speakers. There will definitely be folks from Epic at this event as well.
All right. Well, that just about wraps up the podcast here. Thank you guys for listening, watching. Leave us a like, leave us a rate. Send us $5 on Venmo, buy us a coffee, buy us a beer. Yeah. There you go. That's a thought. If you hit us up about these conferences, I'll take bribes as drinks, 100%. But really, we appreciate all the support, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.